Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
All right. So, Michelle, how are we going?
Oh, very well, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. So you're at the farm?
I am at the farm. Yes, beautiful, sunny. No, it's not sunny. It's just lovely. Yeah, it's not sunny in winter here very much, but it's very green. There you go. It's very green.
All right. There's always a silver lining, hey? We just got to kind of focus on it. Yeah. So this podcast or this interview is going to be another, I think, insightful one. You know, we really cherry pick the people that we have on our podcast. And as we were talking to Dr. Ben Ritter just before, we were talking about our audience and how they're really practically focused. You know, they want tools and they want examples around how we can share what we know in their day-to-day life. So I'm really interested in hearing Ben's take on some of the leadership focus that we talk about. So we've got Dr. Benjamin Ritter, who is a leadership and career coach, and he's also a values geek. And we were just talking about how important values are. Also, he's a learning and development consultant. He's a national speaker. He's also a podcaster himself, author, mentor, and passionate about, you know, guiding people to find a career that they love. He's got over 10 years of experience coaching corporate clients such as people in Amazon, Google, Northwestern, Pinterest, and he really does understand how to guide people in their career path. And since launching his coaching practice, he's guided hundreds of professionals towards creating a career that they love. And who wouldn't want that? He's received his doctorate in organisational development with a focus on value congruence and job satisfaction. He's also earned an MBA in entrepreneurial management and an MPH in health policy administration. So Ben comes to us with a lot of experience, but also a lot of research that we're going to kind of like start to dig into. So welcome, Ben.
I'm really happy to be here. When I hear that, I'm like, I just can't wait for another 10 years. So I can just say, with over 20 years of experience. That's.
And then when you get really old, like us, and you could actually say 30 years of experience, go, no, we're sounding too old. Let's just, you know,
I'm going back to 10.
Over
going
20
back to
years
10.
Experience. Yeah.
Lots of experience. That's a good enough descriptor.
Yeah, that's it. And you know, what you also bring is that balance of not only having the experience, but you've also had the academic aspect to it as well. Because I think, you know, there is always something to learn, especially in, you know, coaching people and leading people. And one of the, you know, when I was looking at your bio and your LinkedIn profile, I came across something that you were speaking at, and that was the Executive Presence event. And Michelle and I, in some of our leadership programs, talk about executive presence. And I thought that that would be an interesting place to start, as what do you think executive presence is, and how can we kind of enhance it? Because what we are noticing at the moment, Ben, is that people are really, there's such an agile work environment at the moment. People are moving quite a lot. You know, they're not staying around in the same organisation that they would now. It's very mobile. So I think presence might be really important for people to understand.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. And I mean, every single client I work with, they've achieved some level of professional success. They're in a high level leadership position, but they don't actually believe they deserve to be called a leader. And so it's hard to have executive presence when you don't believe in yourself. But I want to put a little disclaimer here for a moment, because executive presence and how it's defined really depends on the organization that you're working in. And so a lot of times I'll work with a senior manager or director or VP that is trying to work on their level, their executive presence. And the first question is, well, what is considered executive presence within your organization? So when you're in a meeting, instead of checking your email or doing some other work, you need to be really engaged, and really focused and really present to how other people, other executives are acting. I think that's one of the most important aspects of this is how do they convey themselves? How do they listen? How do they strategize? How do they talk to other employees? How do they provide feedback and recognition? Because there are going to be different styles based on the organization. And that's going to help you stand out as an executive within that specific organization. So I just want to put that big disclaimer out there. I'll pause for a second on that point, and then we can kind of get into some foundational traits of executive presence.
Because what you're saying is that there is a certain convention or a way in which the culture is kind of like can influence the way in which we operate around here.
Exactly. And I mean, you see it in industry specific too. You know, there's certain levels of aggressiveness or enthusiasm or charisma or thoughtfulness and brainstorming and creativeness, and that executives will have based on wherever they are working. There's a certain expectation. If you're in a leadership position, then we expect you to be like this. And that's actually something you can go ask even too of the people that are above you or that at your peer level and say, what do you see as themes and similar traits of the executive team? Or how do you normally like to make decisions? Or how do you like to conduct meetings and communicate? And they can be organizationally specific. And so if you want to stand out in that organization, you don't always want to fit in, but sometimes there are certain executive traits that you do need to exemplify.
So from your experience, Ben, is there something that if everyone was listening to, that they could enhance one particular area across the board that would make a difference? What do you think that would be?
Okay, so across the board, foundational pillars of executive presence. Let's just talk about them one at a time. So we have altitude. And altitude is basically how are you viewing issues, problems, conversations, projects. And executives tend to have a much broader and longer and higher view on things that occur and that conversations are being had. So they're able to say, I see how this specific project in detail relates to this other department and other project that's going on, make that connection, and then also say, and I can see how this might play a role 3 to 5 years from now in some of the other initiatives that we have. And so altitude and having a broader view, as well as a cross-organizational view, is part of executive presence.
Love it. So again, a lot of the things that we see in our leadership programs is a lot of senior leaders don't or can't articulate that link between what it is that their teams are doing and the strategy and the impact on their clients and the end results. And that's part of them developing their leadership skills to be able to do that. And so it's that broad view. And when we look at personality styles, there are certain personality styles who are very focused on the here and now and, what that means for them and their team. And the feedback that they're given is exactly what you said. They have to broaden their view. And I think that's a really good summary of how they do that.
Yeah, and a great way to see if you're struggling with this is to look at your resume or even to look at some of your email communication to some of your peers and say, is this detail oriented? Am I in the weeds? Am I still acting like an individual contributor based on the results I'm creating? Or am I more strategic and do I have a broader vision? And am I making connections and communicating in a way that has a certain level of altitude? And it's a really good way to see if this is something that you struggle with. And if you need to practice this, then one of the first things I'd recommend is to get more exposure across the organization. So if you're not already meeting with other executives, start meeting with other executives and just get kind of a project update, or really start engaging and paying attention in meetings. I can't stress this enough. In the remote environment, it's so easy to check out. And one of the easiest ways to show up more as an executive is just to pay attention. That's it. Yeah. And then not to doubt yourself for what you think not trying to find the perfect thing to say, or actually saying, I don't need to say anything because that makes sense. That's common sense. But it's also engaging within the conversation itself, because you never know what can come from it. And it does matter if you're in the conversation. You can't just be in the conversation. You have to actually be in it. So you have to actually be conversing and chatting and such. And too often I see people just kind of sit back.
I absolutely love that. And I'm just thinking, no matter what level of the organisation I'm in, whether I'm, new to supervising people, or whether I run a whole business unit, or whether I have my own business, you can still start to look up and out in terms of, and I love the word altitude for that. And that is so practical. How can I see whether I'm doing that? Check your emails and also reflect. I'm just thinking after my meetings, do a little bit of a reflection piece on, so how did I go? Was I paying attention? Did I join the dots? Did I make connections broader than just my own little patch? That's really good info, Ben.
And on that note, meeting prep and meeting evaluation are really important for executive presence. And so the prep is, what's the goal of this meeting?
Yeah.
What purpose am I trying to achieve? Yeah. And not just what is the goal of everyone that is in this meeting. So understanding what their main drivers are. And literally this can take 5 to 10 minutes. But if you don't sit down with these questions and try to answer them prior to a meeting, then you're not going to have the answers to them during the meeting, and you're not going to stay on track or be able to have this type of presence within it. And it's so critical to have that underlying foundation of, I understand where we're trying to go with this, and I understand how this impacts the organization as well as the other departments and key stakeholders. And if you can do that, you will be like a shining light in that room.
Oh, without a doubt, because what I find that most people complain about with meetings is they just give us an update. So there's no forward thinking. And one of the questions that we invite people to ask is that, are you really clear about why that person needs to know that? And when you can enter the conversation that they're having inside their head, then you've really kind of like married what your intention is and what they really want.
And I like the idea of, because I think when people, have this thing, and that is, every meeting should have an agenda. And we actually try and we're starting to steer people away from this notion of an agenda as opposed to a goal. Like, what is the purpose of us getting in this room, or, coming together? What is it that we want to achieve? And being more focused on the objective, the outcome and the goal, rather than having a list of things that we've got to get through. And I really like that. And having a goal, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a meeting, whether it's coaching, so important. Always start with that. What's the purpose?
Yeah. Okay, can we move on to point number 2? Even though I think that was a couple points, but
you've got more. Good, go.
It was around one specific point. So I'd say the second one, again, these are moving away from this mindset of individual contributor, and very often a lot of that entails having executive presence. And so one of the other suggestions is to hold off on giving direction and ask a question. And so usually it's ask one more question than you want to. And that relates to executive presence. So the moment you want to give a direction, the moment you want to give an answer, ask one more question. And I promise you, you will be seen more as an executive, and you will get a greater connection with the person you're talking to. And you will get more information to actually help you reach your goals and make the connections cross-functionally and throughout the organization.
Love it. So with the questioning, is there a particular, because there are some people who question and it sounds like an interrogation, and then there are other people who question and it's very wishy-washy. What do they really mean by that? And I think that's the part that you talked about, preparing for your meetings. Have a couple of questions in your back pocket.
Yeah, and a lot of times questions that put people on the defense are questions that seem to attack someone's behavior, motivation, or work product in a way. And so it's more about attacking someone's ego instead of actually trying to understand more about the situation. Instead of, why did you do that? Or, it's can you tell me more about that? Or what was your strategy there when you were working on that? And so you're avoiding the why, the big why, which can put people on the fence. You're avoiding questioning motivations and behaviors. And the questions are for you to understand. That's it. And that's usually a helpful direction.
Great. Okay. So is there anything else that we could work on?
I'd say it can be really tough when we're drained and we have meetings back to back and we're sitting at home staring at a camera screen and we don't have the things that we need to, like, that we normally use to fulfill us because we're locked in into our homes. But showing up with enthusiasm and a little bit more energy to a call, I mean, you are the leader of the pack. And if you come in checked out, you can't blame anyone else for being checked out. And so if it's watching some stand up before you jump on a meeting, if it's having that cup of coffee, if it's even saying, hey, let's take a walking meeting today and let's not even have our cameras on. If it's getting a standing desk, it's whatever works for you. If it's shortening your meetings, if it's making them instead of an hour, 45 minutes, instead of 45 minutes, 30 minutes, instead of 30 minutes, 20 minutes, then you need to do that. But if you need to show up in a way, like, you have to show up. That's it. You have to show up every single day.
Terrific. Yeah, people really feed on energy, don't they? Even if you don't have the competence, if you've got that energy, people want to get you over the line. That's great. I actually want to move on. Is there any more on executive presence? Because we've got so many questions around these other programs that you run.
One other piece, and this is pretty quick. If you say you're going to do something or someone comes to you for advice, you follow up. Yeah. You have to follow up. You have to. And that means through. Follow through. And and that means a lot of times you have to keep notes. Yeah. And so how do you take notes on the meetings? If you're not having one-on-ones, have one-on-ones. We're not going to talk about that right now, but keep notes on your conversations with your direct reports, even your peers. And executives care about the people around them, and they follow up on issues that show up because you are the person that drives things home and executes. You take care of the people that work for you, and they'll take care of you.
Yeah, that's great that you say that. Jan and I, we love this book by Covey, and it talks about trust, the speed of trust, and one of the trust building behaviours is to follow through, like keep your commitments and do what you say you're going to do, and that's one of the ways that you can build trust, and it's one of the ways that you can easily lose trust with another. So yeah, all for that.
And so for the people who are listening to the podcast, those 4 key concepts that you talked about is the altitude, have the broader view, hold off on giving direction, just ask one more question, whether or not it's showing up with enthusiasm or following up and following through, which is really about that integrity. For those people who are listening to that right now, what is that one thing, if you were to enhance, would create the best impact for you and your team? And that's a reflective question, because the more focused we can be in our behaviours and the way in which we operate, the more impact that we're going to have. And so that's the invitation for people who are listening. What could that be that would enhance your presence?
Great summary, Jan. Okay, so I am really interested in your 2 coaching systems, and one of them is the 3 C's of self-leadership, and increasingly Jan and I are using that terminology. It's about self-leadership, managing and leading yourself, and that sort of sets you up to be able to manage and lead others. And you talk about clarity, confidence, and control. Can you expand on those for us?
Of course. And this system came because I was working with clients and I had a decision-making system to help them create more of a value-aligned life for themselves. And I was realizing that certain clients were more successful than others, and that's because they had certain traits. And I identified those traits as clarity, confidence, and control as being responsible for our internal leader, our self-leader, to see how much they were in control of our lives. And so if you're able to develop clarity, confidence, and control in any area of your life that you want to achieve, you are going to achieve it. And so clarity has to do with what is the motivation behind what you care about? And what are the processes and goals that you know on how to achieve them? Confidence is the belief in yourself and the ability to actually do something. So the skills within what you want to achieve. And then control is the prioritization and intentionality, as well as your environment that relates to your goals and your priorities. And so if we're going to take a look at this from a leadership perspective, we could say, okay, so you want to be a greater leader, a greater executive leader. Why? Why does that matter to you? What are your values as a leader? What is your vision as a leader? And based on that vision, long-term and short-term, what are some specific milestones and objectives and goals and priorities? You can look at a year, you can look at 3 years, you can work backwards that you need to achieve to ensure that you're able to be aligned with that vision. And so that's the clarity piece. And then confidence is what skills do you need to listen to? Listen to this podcast. What books do you need to read? What critical beliefs do you have about yourself not being a good enough leader that you need to reframe and work on and create evidence against? And then how do you affirm more positive belief systems and show up in a way where you're confident on a daily basis? Which, by the way, when you have clarity, that tends to create confidence. And I say, like, when you walk in a room and you wonder what people are thinking about you, that's because you don't know what you're thinking about. You don't know enough of what you care for. And so then if you have clarity and you have confidence, you tend to automatically start creating an environment that serves you. So you distance yourself from people that aren't in alignment with you. If you're trying to be an executive leader, you tend to join communities that are filled with executive leaders. You tend to cut people out that maybe are from your past and don't align with where you're trying to go or that are draining of you, as well as you start intentionally working towards this vision. So again, you're prioritizing learning, joining certain organizations, certain brand building activities, internal to the organization and external to the organization, because it's going to create more executive presence for you. So that's kind of how the system is laid out.
And when you were describing, the confidence piece, there is that combination of competence. In order to get confidence, you were talking about, enhancing your learning and development, so those really practical things that you can do that will absolutely enhance your confidence. So there is that combination. Yeah.
Well, so I just want to quickly touch on, I work with a lot of executive leaders that complain about their leaders, their own leaders, but aren't leading in a way that they would want their own leader to lead. And so part of this clarity piece is saying, okay, how do you really want to be led? Like, what are you stressed about? Where do you feel stuck? And how do you take that and start leading in a way that would make yourself proud? And so this is, I think anyone that's listening right now, if you feel stuck at your job and if you don't feel like you have the proper leadership per se, can you show up as the leader that you wish you had? And I promise you, you will learn from that. You will impact the organization. You will create greater executive presence, and you will probably start leading up and influencing change within your organization.
Starts with us.
Well, I think that's
we have to take greater accountability and feel empowered to be the type of leader, and this goes to job satisfaction, to be the type of leader that we want for ourselves, to create the type of job that we want for ourselves. And if we all did that, imagine how great organizations would be to work in.
Yeah, because we are taking accountability. We're not kind of like, palming it off that you have to lead me and then I will be happy as a worker or whatever. I love that, show up as the leader you wish you had. And I think that's a wonderful segue into creating a sense of job satisfaction, no matter where you are, what situation that you're in right now. That is one thing that you could start to do, have that criteria. And then could you leave us with one or two other things that people could start to look at or focus on to enhance their level of satisfaction?
Of course. Part of this is dropping the story that you're telling yourself, because if you're not satisfied at work, you're already living in a specific reality that is going to perpetuate the fact that you're not happy at work. So you're going in every single day telling yourself you're not happy and that you're not in the right place, and you're always going to lose. You're never going to win. You're setting yourself up for failure. So part of it is letting go of that story and starting to believe that you could actually be happy where you are, because happiness is an emotion, and emotions are created within ourselves. And so what do you need to do at work to be happy? And this is, if you want an action item, what work do you love to do? What work excites you? And how do you start doing more of it? And what work do you dislike? And how do you start delegating that work and empowering your employees that might actually like that work to take that on, or stopping that work because it's not really important and you're just doing it because someone told you to do it when you started working there? That's one action item.
And we can all do that. We have someone who was in one of the top 5 banks, and he was a real cerebral, very theoretically oriented. He wrote a white paper, and he was able to create his own section in the bank because he got really clear about what he loved doing and the contribution that would make. And then they created a whole area around him. So it absolutely, is possible. Yeah. Is there anything else that we could do?
Well, we often don't stand up for ourselves and the work that we want to do because we are scared. The fact that we're going to lose our job or that we're going to ruffle feathers, and we're operating from a place of fear. So all of this requires a sense of psychological safety in your organization. And I think that all comes down to the fact that if you're already an executive, you have a proven track record, you're going to be able to get another job. And hopefully you've been building a community. And trust me, you have your job because people value you and believe in your work. If you start having these types of conversations about crafting your specific job towards more of what you're good at, what you'll be effective at and efficient at, will you be able to show up more enthusiastically? You're going to do more for the organization. People are going to support you. So again, drop that story. You don't have to operate in fear. One of the other areas of job satisfaction, the 3 main areas, is social relationships. So are you engaging, or are you just neck deep in work, or are you engaging with certain relationships that you enjoy spending time with, or are you surrounding yourself with specific individuals that drain you? And in the remote environment, it is a little bit harder to make these connections. We have to actually put effort in. When we're already stressed and drained and not happy at our job, but you're telling me to do more work, I'm sorry, yes. But scheduling a 15-minute chat with one of your favorite coworkers is really crucial. And doing that once a week, or specifically pulling in certain departments or people to work on projects that not only are you excited about, but you're excited about the people that you'd be working with. And either mediating conflict or not working with people that you actually don't like. And if you don't like someone, there's other tips we can talk about in terms of how to resolve that, because that's a story in itself. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, just for an immediate action, how can you start connecting with people that you truly enjoy and find that you are more energized after working with?
Yeah, it's all about the feeling response, isn't it? Like what are we drawn towards? We think that the thing that we're going to do is going to make us feel better. And so what is getting clear about what those things are. Is there one other tip? Yeah. Yep.
Oh, the other piece would be real aligning with the meaning and the values behind what your work is, and really actually highlighting the impact and what you can perceive as the value of what you're showing up to do every single day. If you don't feel that what you're doing is important or significant, then it's going to be very difficult to actually be motivated or to find happiness within it. And so you have to figure out some level of attachment that gets you excited in anything that you're doing. There's some reason why you were attracted initially to the industry. There's something there that you can potentially highlight to yourself.
And I think that is a role that a leader can play for their team and their employees, is to create that link and show them how what they are doing is impacting the team or the broader, business goals. And I feel that is a real opportunity for leaders, because sometimes it's very hard when you are an employee to actually see, okay, what impact am I really having on this business or on the end customer? And I think that's a real service that leaders can play for their team members.
I was listening to a story the other day around John Kennedy when he decided to, they want to put a man on the moon, and they were interviewing some of the employees at NASA, and they were interviewing a janitor. And they said, so what do you do? And he said, I'm contributing to putting a man on the moon. So everyone in that organisation understood what the link was, and really believed in it. And can you imagine being that type of leader? What a service that you're doing for people, Yeah,
and it's the lenses that you wear on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Are you choosing to look at life through a negative lens, a pessimistic lens, and a lens that says you're in the wrong place or don't have a future here and aren't being challenged? Or are you putting a lens on that's saying, I'm going to go find challenges. or this is really exciting, or look at all the people I get to impact and engage with. And if we've been living with the dark lens on, if we've been living in that for a while, it's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough to change it. But surround yourself with people that have the other lens on. Listen to podcasts that say these types of things. Hire a coach if you need to, or go talk to your leader and say, look, we really need to get some level of support here, and we need to support each other. Create a best practice peer engagement mastermind at your organization. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here for people to be their own leader.
Yeah, that's great. And I was just going to say about this issue of mindset, for Jan and I talk about high-performing teams, and that's one of the indicators of a high-performing team, and obviously a high-performing individual, is that they have that empowered mindset. And so some of those little strategies that you just rolled off your tongue were really useful, I think, if people did want to start to shift in that way.
So, Ben, you have given us so much information this morning. Like, I love the fact that you went through those 4 key elements of executive presence. You told us about those success traits, and you also gave us some really clear, practical tips on developing job satisfaction. How can we get more of you? Like, how can people reach out and listen and hear what else you're doing and what are you working on?
Yeah, well, first off, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love having conversations. So Dr. Benjamin Ritter, just send me a message, say that you heard me here, and I'd love to chat. And you can also learn more about my work at liveforyourselfconsulting.com. And I just really look forward to hearing from everybody. And hopefully we've created some positive impact with what we've spoken about today. Some more executives, some greater presence, some more job satisfaction.
Yeah, well,
without a doubt.
Yeah, our criteria whether or not it's a great interview is how many notes that we write down. Yeah. So I've taken lots of notes. So and we live and breathe this, there is always a way and a phrase that people use, language that we can learn from, that lights something up in us. And my takeaway is show up as the leader that you wish you
had. My God, Jen, me too. Show up as the leader you wish you had.
Yeah. So thank you, Ben. You totally impacted us on this interview as well. Had some really good takeaways. So is there anything that you would like to leave people with before we,
I'll get personal for a second, because I was a high achiever. I'm a high performing individual. I was always focused on just getting stuff done. So I was very high in the control piece, not so high in the confidence or the clarity piece. And I ended up in places that I didn't end up really want to be, and I wasted a lot of time investing in things that ended up draining me severely, and building an environment around my life that just wasn't important. And so I want to ask everyone listening to pause for a second and really, really understand the importance of clarity. And clarity doesn't mean you know exactly where you're going, but it means that you know why you're showing up. And so sit down for a second and ask yourself, why are you showing up every day? What do you believe that's truly important? And if you feel stressed or stuck in any area of your life, it's probably because there's some misalignment there. And so what's one thing you can do to bring yourself closer to alignment in your life, in your work, your relationships? And that will help us show up a little bit better every single day, a little bit happier. And ultimately, more like an executive, because that's really also how an executive is. They're showing up in a way that is true to themselves and for other people in a way, because that leads itself to being a little bit more of a role model.
Thank you, Ben. I can see why you're a national speaker and podcaster. It's really eloquent. All right. Thank you, Ben. That's been a wonderful time together, and really appreciate your knowledge, expertise, and caring, your level of care.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the People Leaders Podcast. For show notes and other resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. If you have a leadership or management question or subject you'd like covered on the podcast, please contact us at podcast@peopleleaders.com.au. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts on Air Podcast Network.